All right, big news here. No relief for Kejriwal from the top court. Supreme Court to hear Arvind Kejriwal, his plea there against arrest after the 29th of April. So it seems like the case itself, the plea itself will now be heard only on the 29th of April. So that's another good 15 days or 14 days that Arvind Kejriwal will have to wait for the top court to take up the hearing. This is a setback undoubtedly for Arvind Kejriwal, who's not sought relief so far from lower courts. He's approached the top court now. The Supreme Court that was supposed to hear the matter today seemed to have pushed it to after April 29th. So for the moment, we know Arvind Kejriwal gets no relief. There is no interim relief for him at the moment. He was really hoping that the Supreme Court would hear his urgent plea against arrest, calling it illegal. Arvind Kejriwal has said that the arrest protocols itself wasn't in line with law. It's illegal on several grounds that his counsel has argued. It has failed to bring any yield for Kejriwal in the lower courts. At this point, their only last hope is the Supreme Court, and that Supreme Court was supposed to be taking up the plea today. We hear it's now been pushed to the 29th of April. A big setback, surely. So this only means that Arvind Kejriwal at this point will not be participating in the Lok Sabha election campaign's first phase. Let me cut across to our correspondent, Kanu Sharda, joining us on the phone line. Kanu, go on, please give us more details. Supreme Court was supposed to take up the matter today, but it appears that yet another 14 days wait. Supreme Court will be hearing this plea only on the 29th of April.
Yes, Nabila, the Supreme Court has just issued notice to the Enforcement Directorate on Arvind Kejriwal's plea challenging his arrest and remand order, as the Delhi High Court had rejected his petition challenging the same. Now the Supreme Court has categorically said that they will hear the matter from the week commencing April 29. Though senior advocate Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who was appearing for Arvind Kejriwal, has categorically pleaded before the court that he needs some he needs some immediate relief for the campaigning, which is scheduled to start from April 19th, and he needs to campaign. But the court said that, without receiving any formal reply by the ED, they cannot do so, and the formal reply needs to be filed by the Enforcement Directorate over Arvind Kejriwal's plea. The notice has been accepted by the Enforcement Directorate lawyers who was present in the court, and the matter will now be heard only on April, week commencing April 29. So more days, Arvind Kejriwal has to wait for few more days before any kind of relief comes from the Supreme Court.
All right. Now, give us a little sense of the urgent plea, the details of which that he's presented in court. He's said that this arrest itself is illegal. Be it the lower court or the Delhi High Court, for that matter, have come down heavily, saying that this arrest itself is certainly legal, and that he'll have to fight his way through. This is a legal process. Investigation will go on with him being in custody, and there's nothing illegal about it. While the Delhi court observed that, he and his counsel had only hope with the Supreme Court. So give us the finer details of what was there in that plea filed before the Supreme Court.
Well, yes, Nabila, this was also argued today very briefly by Abhishek Manu Singhvi also. He said that the statements given by the accused turned approver are not reliable. But the bench was not in a mood to hear any kind of the arguments put on by Abhishek Manu Singhvi, and said that you should keep your arguments for some other day. And that is why only a notice was issued. But as far as the other plea is concerned, as far as the Kejriwal's main plea is concerned, what are the charges? Because he has challenged all the Delhi High Court observations which were given against him over the Delhi excise policy, wherein the Delhi High Court observed that there was a Hawala transaction link as alleged by the ED, and it needs to be probed further as to what kind of investigation that ED probe will come forward. So he has challenged the ground that, since elections are around the corner, and that is why, since he is an AAP convener, that is why the political party has been witch hunted. So these are all kind of legal points which are being dealt by the Delhi High Court while dismissing Arvind Kejriwal's plea, have been, filed as per challenge in the Supreme Court also. But the Supreme Court has said that they're going to entertain or reply to or do any kind of relief in this case only after a formal reply by the Enforcement Directorate is received by the Supreme Court. So we'll get to know only after last week of April as to what ED response onto Arvind Kejriwal's plea will come and whether any kind of relief will be given by the Supreme Court or not.
So what this really means is that Arvind Kejriwal is likely to be out of action. He's not going to be out of prison until the 29th of April when that next hearing happens and if the Supreme Court grants him relief. So for the moment, he's likely to stay in prison as the ED case continues on the Delhi liquor policy case. I'm going to cut across to Nalini also joining us, tracking court for us for more insights on this with Kejriwal not getting relief. Nalini, at this point, can we say safely that he is going to be absent from all campaigning for the first phase of Lok Sabha elections that happens on the 19th of April? It's unlikely that Arvind Kejriwal will be seen in action. He will not be released from prison.
Well, Nabila, there are a lot of fast-paced developments that have happened in this case since the time that Arvind Kejriwal has been arrested. So even though for now the Supreme Court has not allowed any kind of relief for him, his lawyers had specifically pushed for some relief to allow him to campaign for the elections, but no order on that has been issued by the Supreme Court just as yet. The hearing has been kept for the last week of April, so it remains to be seen as to whether or not his lawyers strategize some other legal move between now and the last week of April to try and ensure that he in fact is able to campaign for the elections, because remember, his former deputy Manish Sisodia has also specifically asked for interim bail to be allowed to campaign for these elections. So a similar strategy might be followed by him, but all of that is speculation at this point. Today, the Supreme Court has only issued notice to the Enforcement Directorate. They've asked them to respond by the last week of April, which is when arguments on this case will be heard. But one very important thing that was stated by Abhishek Manu Singhvi right at the outset when the matter was taken up is that there are some very selective leaks that are happening in this case. Of course, Abhishek Manu Singhvi is essentially hitting out at the Enforcement Directorate and the kind of information that Enforcement Directorate through its sources is sharing with the media related to the probe that is ongoing in the excise policy case. And today, Abhishek Manu Singhvi has raked this issue up even before the Supreme Court. He's gone ahead and said that he wants to state something that will shock the conscience of the court and about how there are selective leaks that are happening in this matter. So it remains to be seen whether or not Kejriwal's legal team will argue on this in detail in the last week of April when the matter comes up. Also as to whether or not they will try and approach the entire issue of him coming out of jail to campaign for the 2024 elections through some other strategy, maybe by applying for bail, because Kejriwal is still not applied for bail. So a lot of developments can be expected. Just because there's no relief coming in today, we cannot say for certain that Kejriwal will not be able to come out, because like I told you earlier, there's a lot of strategy that is going on behind the scenes between his legal team, and it remains to be seen what they come up with to try and ensure that he can come out and campaign for the Lok Sabha polls.
All right, Nalini, a quick word. You did mention about Arvind Kejriwal not applying for bail. Is that right? And would you be able to take us through the strategy that his counsel is adopting for the moment? That they are following precise protocols? Is that what we are looking at?
Well, Nabila, their strategy at this point seems to be to challenge the arrest itself. That's the plea that Kejriwal had made even earlier before the High Court, where he challenged the arrest, he challenged the subsequent remand that was granted after he was arrested. But at the same time, no particular bail application has been filed by either him or his lawyer so far. In fact, while the High Court was pronouncing the verdict, the High Court had made it clear that this was only on the plea that was challenging the arrest, because bail had not been sought by Kejriwal so far in the case. As to why that is, it is of course speculation at this point, but considering how it has happened in the case of BRS leader K. Kavita, where immediately after she was sent into judicial custody in the ED case, the CBI also moved in first to question her and eventually then also arrested her in the case. So it might be a strategy, keeping in mind that the CBI is also involved in the probe, to not apply for bail till the time both the ED and the CBI probes are over, to give him the best chance to secure bail from the court of law. But at the same time, they are not holding themselves back. They've challenged the arrest. They've challenged the arrest earlier before the High Court, where they got no relief. But now they've challenged that order before the Supreme Court of India, where they're calling the arrest itself illegal. They're saying there was no imminent need to arrest him. But at the same time, the ED, in a very categorical response before the High Court, had gone ahead to call him the kingpin and the key conspirator of this scam. So every step of the way in this case, the ED is going to be opposing any relief that can be granted to the Delhi Chief Minister. But now the ball is essentially in the top court of the country to decide as to whether or not the Delhi Chief Minister, who's still the sitting Chief Minister, will be allowed to come out and campaign for the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, and as to whether or not the court will show any urgency in even hearing his plea, keeping in mind that he's the first sitting Chief Minister in the country to be behind bars and to be running the government, no less of the national capital, from Tihar jail itself. Back to you, Nabila.
All right. We have Nalin Kohli joining us on the phone line, the BJP Neta. Let's get a sense of what the BJP, how the BJP views this case. Arvind Kejriwal, Mr. Kohli, has no relief from the Supreme Court, at least for the moment. The hearing, urgent hearing against ED arrest itself has been postponed until after 29th April. So it's unlikely that he may be seen in action campaigning for the Aam Aadmi Party. Do you believe that this will really bring in the kind of sympathy that Arvind Kejriwal hopes to receive this Lok Sabha, or will it be otherwise?
This is not about sympathy, and this is not about scoring political brownie points. This is about a case which is an investigation into an allegation of serious corruption by Mr. Kejriwal's government, the Aam Aadmi Party government of Delhi, of which he is the Chief Minister. His two colleagues and ministers who work under his direction, who work on his whatever he thinks is the right decision and which he approves, finally are in jail for over a year, not getting bail because they changed the liquor scam, allegedly did not follow the procedure, allegedly have helped individuals, and allegedly have taken large sums of money, which, to put it as bluntly, amounts to a bribe. So therefore, in that, two of his ministers who work under his direction are in jail. Now, Mr. Kejriwal is the Chief Minister, the one who runs the government and is the supreme person of the party, is supposed to give cogent answers about these allegations against his government. On every occasion over the last year and a half, 2 years, Mr. Kejriwal either has chosen to divert the attention to another topic or has tried to run away from the investigation. You ask him about the liquor policy, he'll speak about the health policy of Delhi. You ask him about the 8 summons sent by the investigative agency, he had an excuse every time. I am busy, I am in Vipassana, I am electioneering, these are illegal, this time I won't go, next time I'll go, finally he's arrested. The courts have kept that arrest going. So Mr. Kejriwal ultimately has to give answers. This is not about sympathy. If he had cogent answers, he wouldn't be in this position.
Arvind Kejriwal's counsel suggests that an arrest based on approver statements alone can't be taken, as the gospel truth, and that he can't be held in prison during election time. The timing is the question raised.
Election cannot be an argument. And this was by Mr. Raju. The ASG quite correctly and forcefully pointed out in the High Court that can you say that a person, for example, convicted of murder is going to say, because now it's election, I'm a candidate, I should be released from jail? That is not an argument. The argument is whether there is an allegation against you on which there is reasonable basis, reasonable material that points to your being involved in that, and therefore, should you be investigated further, if required, taken into custody. The courts are only keeping him in custody. Mr. Kejriwal is not being kept in custody by any political party. It's finally the agency and approved by the court. The court is extending that remand. Secondly, Mr. Kejriwal and his legal team are entitled to have any argument they wish to say. But the core argument still remains. What are the answers to the liquor scam of Delhi? Now, on the approver statement, the law is clear on the approver statement. Why are they arriving at this conclusion that there is only an approver statement? Every person who is, and as a lawyer I must point this out, every person who's accused, the material against that person may be different. So Mr. Sanjay Singh's case would be different to Mr. Kejriwal. Mr. Sanjay Singh is not the Chief Minister of Delhi. Mr. Sanjay Singh is not directing the ministers in the government of Delhi. Mr. Sanjay Singh has an allegation, allegedly of receipt of money. But here the policy is important. The lack of procedure is important. The allegation of corruption is being used in the Goa election is important, of which Mr. Kejriwal's case is on a different footing.
You know, finally, Mr. Kohli, running the state of Delhi through prison. That's what the Aam Aadmi Party is hell-bent on, saying jail se sarkar. Kejriwal will carry out governance while he's in Tihar jail. And they've also worked out a method here where 2 ministers every week will be meeting Kejriwal one after the other. This is a cycle that they will continue. Today, you had Bhagwant Mann, the Punjab Chief Minister, in a first, meeting Kejriwal in Tihar.
जेल से सरकार या बेल पे सरकार is not the matter. The matter is सरकार को ठीक से चलना चाहिए as per the constitution. Mr. Kejriwal's hunger for power is evident in this. They are trying to make a virtue of actually something which is serious. Then why did Mr. Kejriwal accept the resignations of Mr. Sisodia and Mr. Satyendra Jain? They are in jail also. How are they different? They are ministers. He is the chief minister of the government. So therefore, Mr. Kejriwal has made one thing clear. The rules for him will be different to the rules for his colleagues. So therefore, this is not a virtue. This is pure hunger for power, clinging on to power, and trying to make a virtue where none exists.
Right. Thanks very much, Mr. Nalin Kohli, for joining us on that.